and decide how you would like to use it.
Yep. Yeah, so some of the preliminary information on the contracts module, it's not like a procurement of the contract per se, where, some clients, it's the start to finish product for the contract itself. Yeah.
How do we get there?
Oh, you don't need to worry about here. This is the roles. I just wanted to, I want to show you some of the permissions that you can set for users, but I was just opening the screen.
So we would be,
And I don't have security set up for contracts, so you may not even be able to access it with your profile right now. So I've taken it completely out because we haven't set it up yet, but we'd be happy to help you set it up if you want it. And we don't have any rush. There's no hurry on when we're going to roll it out.
Yeah, if you are able to access the program, it's under financials,
but we've
purchasing.
purchased this. So we've
Recently.
already bought the contract
It's-
module.
Part of our contract, yes.
Yeah. That's right. Was it in the original?
It was in the original.
It was, okay, so it should be installed.
Yes, it is
Is it?
installed. This
Okay.
is just part of our purchase. It wasn't that we wanted contracts. It came with it. We can decide if we want to keep it and use it or not.
Okay.
Okay, so you should be installed and, like I said, provided they have the access menu, they should be able to get in there. So it's under financials, purchasing, contract management. There's some preliminary settings that I'll go through, which in themselves lend to certain types of contracts being able to be used, and certain tracking on contracts. Like I said, on the front end, the contracts module within the ERP system is more to house the terms and facilitate the contract as far as, threshold, spending, retainage, not necessarily like a start with a boilerplate and route it for signatures and terms and all of that. That's generally done outside of ERP. And then once the contract itself is established, let's say with a contractor and signed, then those terms are entered into the contract module within ERP. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So with that, under the contract settings, let me blow this up. You have different options like setting the default contract, next contract number. So some clients, each department kind of manages their own contract numbers. Some places go through like a clerk or, the county clerk or, clerk of the commission, whomever, that tracks the contract numbers based on what the actual contract number is. And then that is manually entered in, so they could be sporadic, they could be different for different types of contracts, different for different departments. Within ERP, you set the next contract number, and they have the option to click press 1 when they establish a contract, and it would just assign the next sequential number. Okay.
Or we can manually
Or you
override,
can
make it
manually
okay.
enter, right. And to manually enter, there is a permission allow manual entry of contract numbers. If that's unchecked, then users would be forced to use the next system number. But and that's a system-wide setting. So as long as that's checked, then they have the option to manually enter the contract number or choose the next one.
And the way I view this rolling out is that you guys would be the ones entering the contract, so you would have control. Nobody else is going to be entering, numbers and things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have also the option to default contracts to be rolled. What that means is within the ERP system, when the contract terms are entered as a contract record, there's a flag that says to be rolled. The intent on that is that contract is longer term than that current year. And some of that's going to play on whether, what type of contract enforcement method it is. And by that, I mean the contracts have, I think it's 8 or 10 different enforcement methods, being one of them is encumber. So similar to a purchase order, you can put line GL account allocation lines and say on this contract, this GL account has $10,000 available to spend. The next line might be a different account for $20,000, and maybe a contractual services line with $2 million, depending on what the project and line allocations are. And then when it's, from there, when it's spent against, then it would unencumber and move the money to the actuals, just like a purchase order. On a contract, you can also assign a purchase order after the contract is built. So with that, some clients opt not to encumber on the contract. They just treat it like a tracking mechanism. Maybe they put a cap not to exceed $5 million. It does not earmark or encumber funds at the GL account level until it's either directly spent or a purchase order is entered associated with that contract. Okay, then at the purchase order level, the funds would be encumbered. You know, so there's some decisions there as far as, you know, most clients don't allow all types of contracts. You know, some of them are it's all encumbered. Some of them, they're all not to exceed or limitless, which means it's just an open contract for tracking. There's no ceiling on it. So in that regard, the budget tracking would be at the purchase order when they're entering a purchase order against that contract to make sure that the money is available to be encumbered. You can allow creation of contracts from requisition. So I'm going to kind of digress just a little bit because Benjamin asked about talking a little bit about the bid module. So within ERP, there's also a separate bid module that, depending on your procurement process and everything, you know, you can assign buyers, use workflow, use commodity codes, build the bid out in the bid module. On your vendors, you can have the vendors that are, you know, signed up through another program as well, vendor access, receive bids directly when you build them in ERP, and you would basically publish them. It's a notify button, and it would push it out to those vendors that are set up to receive bid notifications based on certain commodities and different parameters. You know, it kind of works similar, I guess, to like Demand Star and some other online third-party procurement sites where the vendors are set up. When you enter a contract, it notifies them, hey, there's a new bid out here for if y'all are interested, go look at it, bid on it, what have you.
Is that free to the vendors?
Pardon?
Is that free
Yeah.
to the vendors?
Yeah.
So no cost?
No.
For them to sign up?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a whole different process which we'll talk about at some point here with the vendor access, which is it's a third-party link where vendors can go in and they can set themselves up, you know, be a bid only or a temporary vendor. Part of it would depend on workflow. You know, so if I'm a brand new vendor and I go on vendor access and I want to, you know, sign up to be a vendor with the county, I would go in and add it. Provided the workflow is set up, I would come in as basically a stop or temporary vendor until somebody internally looked at it and approved and okayed it and activated my vendor. With that, there's also some other controls on the vendor access that you can allow them to, you can both make required and allow them to attach certain documents, like maybe you want them to update their own 1099s out there online, or W9, sorry, online. You know, you can make that available to them. You can provide,
COIs?
pardon?
COIs, certificates of insurance?
Yep.
That as well?
Yep, that can be a document type out on vendor access that you provide them to be able to upload. Some clients will allow vendors online to update their own banking information. There is specific work groups that can be set up so that if you have online vendors and you want to allow them to update their banking information, it doesn't immediately change. It has to come through an internal workflow where then somebody in the county, you know, would have to review it, you know, and because I've seen unfortunately, a lot of banking, online EFT, ACH fraud lately. You know, I highly, and I have for a long time, recommend somebody internally review it, verify it with the vendor before they allow that change. I was working with a client recently that had a couple requests come in, and also I know personally, they didn't really verify it. It looked legitimate. They changed it, and it ended up being fraud.
So Jay,
Yeah.
what you're talking about there is the vendor portal, right? There's
Correct,
some vendor access. So we have contracts, we have vendor access, We have not purchased bid and quote. So
Right.
that's something that I wanted you to be aware of how it could interact so that if we in the future wanted to bring it all into this integrated platform, we could. Just to make you aware of what it does.
Right. Yeah, so this is just really like a high-level discussion of the different pieces right now.
And so I envision this as a question and answer.
Yeah.
I hear you breathe a lot, like you're wanting to ask a question. So this is an interactive.
I appreciate, I have a lot, I have a lot of questions. And if I'm you've got a good backhand, I hear, so, feel free to incorporate that as needed. So, quick question on the, never mind.
Just practicing.
So on the contract side, we enter a contract, users create a purchase order, but maybe they don't tie it to a contract.
Okay.
After the fact, can we go in and link the two, or does it have to be upon creation of the purchase order?
It's much easier when it's done at the creation of the purchase order. You can't go in after the fact with a change order and assign it to that contract.
You can't?
You can.
Oh, you can't.
Preferably before there's any payments on the purchase order, because then that becomes even more complicated, because then you've got to deal with like modify invoices, and kind of depending on everything, it may require that check be voided, the invoice be voided, re-entered, so it's much easier to try to regulate that.
So in the requisition entry, you are an approval level. And so nothing goes by you on requisitions. You get them all.
Right.
So that could be your level where you look for contracts.
And assign them or send them back?
Send it back and say you didn't put train them. Send it back, say you didn't enter the contract.
Okay.
So there's opportunities
Sure.
there. I'm not saying you have to use it there.
Right,
but
right.
That would be the most convenient way to capture the things.
Well, because
that
I'm also thinking of like all resolutions as they're awarded. They're technically contracts, and it would be an excellent way to keep track of the spend towards those. And so, like, we have a capital project that's awarded Thursday for $100,000 for laptops. Then whatever that resolution number, that's our contract number.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got the spend tied to that resolution.
I think once we train people, it would be a lot easier. It may take a while. We may have a lot of go back and try to redo this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But after we get the training done, people are going to be pretty well used to, hey, okay, this is purchasing on this deal. Especially the expenditure authorities would have to be a gatekeeper for that. Don't let it out of their purview until they've attached their contract or resolution information.
Ooh-wee.
It could do a lot.
Yeah.
It could be a pain.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay. So, like I said, these are settings, and if we move forward with the contract setup, we would do, more formal, how do you currently do things, future state analysis, the setup, the configuration, all of that, and then work into the business process, setup and training, similar to requisitions and purchase orders. So, like I said, there's a lot of this just kind of discussion points. But you have different options. Like on the contracts, you can track very detailed line, like by item. If you end up using commodities or items, you could track items. You can track quantity of items, similar to like on a purchase order if you're buying, quantity versus services. The contracts within ERP, like I mentioned, can be encumbered against. They could be multi-year, meaning they're carrying out to 2, 3, 5 years. So there's a whole year-end process for kind of closing out the activity on that contract for this year and rolling it forward. One of the other considerations on that regard is what happens with the budget on encumbered contracts. When you carry that contract forward, similarly with purchase orders, if you're carrying it forward, does that budget automatically roll forward with it? Does that budget lapse, but the encumbrance carries forward, which means the departments would need to consider that and add that into their appropriations request for the new year. You know, so some of that would probably be a budgeting decisions and organization as a whole, how that process might work. So they establish the ability to have multiple vendors on a contract. There's only been one or two clients that I'm aware of that have actually used that. One specific client, which used to be where I formerly worked, paid for the modification on that. You know, personally, I'm of the opinion a contract belongs to one vendor, you know, and you can make payments to subcontractors directly against a main contract.
We just have to
Contractor.
modify the contract number.
We put this in because of our term and supply with multiple
Right.
vendors. So
Right,
that's
yeah.
why I set up this setting the way I did.
And we can do it like the state does. And the state will use the same contract number,
But put
just
a
with a dash
dash
one,
one,
or
dash
a
two.
dash with the initials of the company.
Right,
or,
yeah.
You know,
So there is, I mean, I don't know what the downside of this is, but when we have a term and supply that's an unlimited dollar amount for a
Right.
term with multiple vendors, I don't know that there's any problem using the same contract for those vendors. What's the downside of that, Jay?
I don't really know of downside, because it's all gonna track under that same contract, and then the payments would go to the specific vendors.
Yeah,
You know,
so,
so-
it just, in my mind, how much was used on that term and supply, have
Right,
it all
that's
under one
what-
contract, less for our users to go, oh yeah, this is term and supply, but I gotta remember it's for this vendor, not that one.
and we can see then too, under that same contract, the spend with each vendor that
Yep.
was awarded
Right.
a whole lot easier too. I like
Right.
I
that.
like that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, okay.
Like I said, you can allow direct payment to subcontractors. So there's a couple ways you can do that. If you're entering an invoice to that subcontractor, there's an option in the AP invoice payment to say this is a subcontractor payment, and then it would ask, you know, for the contract, and that would tie that subcontractor payment back to the contract and track it.
Which we wouldn't,
We don't normally have to do, but Missouri law is if your contractor does not pay the subs, you are liable to the subs. So if you pay your contractor $100,000, they haven't paid their subs, you are liable if they don't. And so one of the things that, I don't know if we do,
then
but
that's gonna have to change our terms and conditions, because our terms and conditions state otherwise, that
So-
the contractor's responsible for their subs, and we don't have
so
anything.
you might run that by Kevin Graham. When I worked in a contract situation with my church, is we asked for payment certificates that they had paid their subs. If we were looking for,
Is that, because we don't pay, right? So like, we wouldn't have anything to even do with that.
so most of our contracts are with an individual contractor, like, you know, and so most of the time they're doing the work, like when we talk big bridge projects. But if we do something like an entire building build, or we're building out a new admin building, then they're gonna have electrical, they're gonna have plumbers, they're gonna have all kinds of things. Those subcontractors, then, you know, that could be a way that we pay directly, but it's not so, most contractors don't wanna do that. And, so it's just in the case of something ugly,
Well,
we're liable.
So when I worked for HDR Engineering, we were the consulting engineers. So we would oversee the project and the contractor that was building it for our client. And then we would get every week, we would get payment. We would get like basically a payment sheet of what they paid their subcontractors for that week, and we had to keep that on file.
Yeah,
So,
so just
And
something
that's
to
at
make
the
note of.
department level. That wouldn't necessarily be at our
well,
level.
right, no, that wouldn't be at our level, that would
We
be.
wouldn't even know that stuff.
So like highway would need to keep those
Right.
salary reports. Basically, they were salary or payment reports that the contractor had to provide. And so in this case, instead of it being the consulting engineer, it would be the department that would need to
Yeah.
keep track of those funds.
So that's just a note. I mean, I don't want to get too
Yeah, I don't
sidetracked,
either,
but just
but-
something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
We might need to use that eventually.
Okay. So yeah, so there's some other different terms and stuff that we could get into with the contracts, but basically the different contract methods, which is how the contract is set up in the system. You know, you have encumbered accounts, similar to a purchase order. You put the account on there to encumber the funds at the account level against the budget. Non-encumbered accounts, where you assign what accounts the contract's going to be spent on, but it does not encumber the funds at the contract level. It would rely on the purchase order when it's entered, if it's entered against the contract, to encumber those funds. Amounts by segments, so maybe what department that contract is going to be spent for, but it could be a myriad of different accounts, so you could limit it to a certain fund or department or, object code, yeah, and then spent anywhere within that parameter. A not to exceed, which is essentially a cap amount, $5 million. Don't care what GL account, what fund, anything it's spent against, it's just a tracking mechanism. Then you've got limitless, which is just a contract, no dollar limit, no encumbrances. It literally it's a repository for what was spent on that contract. Basically it's geared around, it's limited by the purchase orders entered or the total budget that people are spending on the GL accounts themselves. Then you've got the items, items 6, 7, and 8 with encumbered, with non-encumbered, with account segments.
We don't use items. So.
Yeah, most clients don't, especially on contracts, but those are options. And then on the other side of the coin, rather than a spending contract, you got an option for revenue contracts. So like one of the examples I like to use is we had towers at the city I was at, and like Sprint contracted to lease part of our tower for their repeaters. So we put the contract in as a revenue with them as the customer, and then we could track when we receive those payments from them.
And you can put expiration dates and when they're up for renewal and things like that. So it could be beneficial on that end.
Yep. And then on the roles, which is setting up individual permissions for the contract module, you've got actually quite a bit of power as far as what you can limit individual users to do, from maintaining, changing the contract method, doing the roles, contingency amount. So if you've got a contract that's $5 million, but maybe there's $500,000 that's contingency money, you can set that money aside as contingency, and so basically it's a $4.5 million contract. Until any of that contingency is released, it can't be touched or spent against. So there's different things, like you can allow individuals to release and post their own contracts, manage and post others. You can limit what types of contracts system-wide or by user are available for them to set up.
So what I envision here is that purchasing would have complete control over the contracts, and that users would only be able to enter stuff against the contracts. They wouldn't have any control over posting or creating or modifying. If they have a problem, they call you guys and you work out the details of fixing the contract. So that's what I was envisioning here, the way we operate. I just don't see that it makes sense to have users have any access to this kind of stuff.
But they can view, right?
Well, they could view and they could enter the contract. So that would be very important. They could enter it on their requisition.
Tie it to.
Yes, tie it to. So it's very important that they be able to see the contracts, to see the terms, things like that.
Right, so on the contract entry screen, obviously once individual permissions and the system setup is complete, you've got where you'd enter the contract, the method, if you're using line items, if it's a customer revenue contract versus a vendor expending contract, some different, if you had a situation where a contractor, let's say, was being sued, or the court said, hey, don't pay this contractor any more money, maybe they got some tax thing going on. If you come out and click on hold payments, nothing would be able to be entered as far as payments on that contract. Obviously on the vendor side, if that situation occurred, you might want to put a stop on that vendor to cease any payments altogether. But as far as the contract itself goes, this would stop any payments from processing on the contract.
No matter where it was in the process?
Correct.
Okay.
So then you got some standard information of what department, if it's on a bid or an RFP, the requisition, if it came from that, if it's against a project. You can track types and subtypes. It's kind of like a hierarchy for grouping and reviewing and reporting. You can track percentage complete on the contract. This is a manual piece here but you can also put an administrator on that contract with a workflow to either approve or notify. This is outside of the standard workflow. And over here you have a percentage that you can put in, let's say 80%. Once that contract reaches 80% of its specific spending, then the administrator would get either notified or required to additionally approve payments on that contract after the 80% threshold is reached. You have dates. So as Benjamin mentioned, you can put an initial expiration date. There's permissions to not allow people to pay against this contract once that expiration date is reached. Meaning if they try to put in a purchase order or a invoice, that invoice date is dated beyond the contract expiration, it would stop them. Then they would have to go through.
And the current setting I chose was to allow them, because I envision we'll get an invoice long after the contract expired, but back to the term. So I chose an option to allow them to enter it against an expired contract.
Okay. Then there's down here, this is all summarized based on the additional tabs that are built. So you've got retainage. You can recalculate with change orders. So contracts similar to purchase order, once it's entered and posted, you have change orders. So maybe you add, for whatever reason, they add an additional, authorize $500,000 more on that contract. You can go in and you can increase the amount of the contract. Well, initially, if you're going to track retainage, it is set up down here based on a step function, meaning that if it's a $10 million contract and maybe the first 50% of the payments are retained at 10% and the second half of the contract is retained at 5%. It would calculate out from when you enter the contract and set up the retainage steps, how much, is the cap retainage. How much has been retained to date, which is automatic. When they're paying the AP invoice, it would automatically withhold. It would go to a retainage control account. A couple of things that does is it really stops people from, some clients will purchase order for 10 million and they would do a credit to the retainage control on the PO, manually track all that. This would be systematic. Nobody would have to enter the amount of the PO or the payment and enter the credit to the retainage. It would systematically process it. On the back end of that, there's a process to say, all right, we're at a point, we're authorizing release of, $25,000 to the contractor. You would go into a retainage release program, tell it this vendor, this contract, payments between this date and this date, we're going to release this amount. Then it would automatically create the AP invoice from the retainage control account and show it on here as liquidated. If you had a situation where, maybe the contractor violated terms or used substandard product or ran late and they were being penalized by loss of some of their retainage, you can permanently withhold, basically meaning you're moving that retainage money out of retainage and taking it into your own coffers because the contractor is being penalized and they're not going to get that. And that would all track here as well. And then, of course, it's going to show how much is remaining. Some of the other things, like here, the accounts, this is where they could distinguish what, project strings from the project ledger or GL accounts are either encumbered or non-encumbered to. Items, if you were to use that.
Well, can you talk about that for a second? The items?
Yeah, so the items, there's a couple different options. There's an items file. It's usually used with inventory, so you've got different items, for issuance and stuff through the inventory module. But you could also use the items file without it, and basically it would track,
Paper costs
paper,
$2.
building, cinder blocks, whatever, literally. It's similar to commodity codes, but not quite as defined. And the items, you can track your own items numbers versus like NAGP commodity codes.
But like, for instance, our contracts would be, like when we itemize things for culvert pipe, 6-foot stainless steel, whatever, it's this amount. There's no like part number or item number, but it's this is, if you order this, this is how much it costs.
Right.
Or like inmate meals, you know, like, this is how much it costs per meal, this is how many meals were given, this is how much the invoice is for.
And you could set all those up as items in the items table if you wanted to.
We are currently, all the settings are set to not use items at all. So I need to comb through if we decided to use it. I personally think that it's a ton of maintenance. It's,
I
in
do
my
too,
opinion,
that's why I was
almost too
asking the
much effort.
question.
Yeah.
So.
I can see how it could be a benefit for you guys, but I also see that it's a ton of maintenance.
Well, could we, okay, then my next question would be, like, if the contract side were used more for services or contracts for specific spend with this vendor, not necessarily specifically what, but then, but those are for commodities. I'm sorry, for services. And then we use the marketplace, the online ordering for commodities. And kind of train it that way, because the online ordering methodology is still tied to cooperative contract pricing, which is the majority of our cooperative purchases come from.
So there's only a few vendors that are on the shop online. You've got Amazon and Staples, I know are, I think CDW is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of our vendors, if we use anybody other than the big main corporations,
Mm-hmm.
you won't be able to shop online.
Unless we use a third-party system that works with Munis.
Okay.
And ties our marketplace.
You're aware that there is one?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because I haven't heard of that.
Okay, I have, and you're probably very familiar with Veris.
Jay, are you familiar with Veris?
I'm not.
Okay.
Is that a portal or?
It's a third-party, I guess, housing database for e-marketplace.
Okay, all right.
There's
So
a,
I'd be curious if they can integrate through that e-procurement.
They can.
Okay.
like I've seen that, we've sat
Demo.
through a couple demos and they're going through some implementations right now in the state.
With ERP, with Tyler ERP?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only reason I even found out about them and got super duper pumped
Yeah, and I
about
know
it.
there's different, like procurement, there's a bunch of third-party software systems that can't integrate. I
Understood.
don't know about them all.
Yeah,
Yeah, when
That's
we get
interesting.
into that point, like integrating with third parties, that's kind of outside our domain.
well, this would be a
as
time to talk about it though, right? Because like,
Yeah.
like if we were to move forward with it on the commodity side, that would be how we could ensure that
Getting the contract
we're
price.
getting contract pricing. Nobody's arbitrarily entering
Right.
numbers and then it's like, and then it's pushed to the invoice section. The orders are placed through the marketplace, transferred into Munis as an invoice.
Well, and is that, let me make sure I'm clear. So is that for like just standard procurement, kind of like Dell or you? would go out-
Granger, you know.
Okay, yeah, so that's all part of, would be a
Staples,
part
Office
of
Depot.
online shopping.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then there would be like, on the vendors, you would set up a portal URL. So when you go into requisitions, you would click that online shopping, that we kind of touched base on a little bit yesterday, where it would take you out to their website.
Yes.
You want to order 6 of this, 7 of
Yes.
this. When you punch out or check out on the site, it'll pull all of those different line items and descriptions and costs and quantities into your requisition. Then you would go through your internal requisition, approve it. When it's printed as a PO, the back end of that would push that back to the vendor and say, all right, it's a purchase order, here's the PO number, go ahead and ship this order. Yeah, and then that would pretty much finish the procurement part, and then the payment on the back end would be configured, set up with the vendor separately.
So it sounds like we would probably we could use the contracts for services. Then this Veris would work through the e-procurement and would probably go to their hub and they'd connect to all these different vendors and then come back in and import, is what you've seen? Okay. All right, well, that
Yeah.
sounds interesting.
it's pretty phenomenal. And next time, I can get on a call, or if you want to sit on a demo from the beginning, I'll schedule a new one.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like that would be part of the online, and then from there, as I mentioned on the setup, you could create contracts from the requisition, which would flow right through, once you finish the online shopping portion, requisition to, rather than to PO, you could create a contract from that requisition.
I don't think we'd create a contract from the requisition.
Yeah,
No,
that's what I was
okay.
saying too.
No.
I put no on all of those
Yeah.
options.
Okay.
No, no.
So just create a purchase order with the individual line items that are.
Purchased off of the
Right, okay.
contracts that are already, cooperatives that are already established for those commodities.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon was
Yeah.
excited that we were changing to Munis.
Yeah.
That guy got like
Super excited.
people's buddies paints.
But I'm glad to hear, I am glad to hear that Amazon is supported through the marketplace through Munis, because it's not supported through Veris.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear, that there's that option still remains for departments.
Okay. Yeah, and here's the flat items file, which is basically a generic items. You create your own item numbers, codes, establish your unit cost, unit usages, and kind of track them. And then these can be tied to this items file here.
Yeah, I don't see that we would use that. I think it's too much maintenance.
I don't like it. And then
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of times I see this used in conjunction with the inventory module, where, like you might be, like you say, doing piping or, laying fiber optics, and you have an internal telecom department where, yeah, you might have third-party contractors doing some, but you might be procuring your own, fiber optic line and charging yourself back, or, taking out of your own inventory against that contract.
okay.
Okay. Then you got the ability, like I mentioned, to have subcontractors tracked. You also, through the vendor portal, you also have the ability to track MBEs, or minority business enterprise vendors. Like veteran-owned, small disadvantaged, female-owned, whatever the minority classifications, for Missouri are. And then, if you have certain federal contracts or even grants that you have to track and maintain proof that you're paying 25% of that contract is, maybe it's ARPA money that has to be spent on certain MBE type vendors. You could track them in here to, basically prove, if you get audited, these are the payments that were made to qualified MBEs to satisfy the terms of the government money paying this contract or whatever. You can track your insurance certificates. You put them in here, and then it's not showing it all, but there's a way with the email on the vendors that you're adding in here with the insurance, that at 30, 60, 90, and expiration date, the vendors would get an email saying, hey, we've got this insurance certificate, it's 90 days from expiration, can you send us a new one? Hey, haven't gotten it, 60 days out, sends them another one, 30 days, and then the date of expiration, so, you're in violation of your contract, we don't have a renewed insurance, workers' comp, whatever it is. And then if you have bonds in lieu of retainage, you can track them here as well. I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. You have some additional options like performance. So if you have a vendor on a contract that's performing very badly, they're always late, substandard goods, you can actually put performance comments or measures out there.
Would that be the same as our contract performance reports that we do? Would that be where somebody could put that information in there?
If you have a report that you prepare, you can attach these.
Sweet.
So each contract can have its own set of attachments.
Right.
You could have the signed contracts out there and any kind of
Yep.
performance reviews.
Oh, and any of the maybe sunshineable stuff.
Yep.
Like the newspaper advertisement or like
Oh, yeah,
the-
that'd be great.
The
Yeah.
bid tabs and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
That'd be cool. Alrighty.
bring it all in under the one place.
Yeah. And then the renewals would house there too, like renewal 1, 2,
Yeah.
3.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the other side over here too, on the milestones, you know, kind of like a Gantt chart, you can actually set up to say, you know, like at this date, inspection 1, at this date, inspection 2, inspect, and you can set like contract reviews, retainage release date reviews, pay app dues.
Will those have notifications options attached to them, or is that just a text? You know?
No, they're set up as codes. I don't believe that they have technically notifications per se, but you can go in and, you know, the contract administrator, you know, would have, and you can print a Gantt chart from it too, to be able to say, you know, these due dates, and then they could go in and say when it's done, if it's past due, you know, they can add notes to it, why, you know, maybe the inspection was pushed out 60 days.
So on your hub, you see how there's the green approvals, there's the orange notifications. So anything that's set up to notify would come into that little card.
Can you show me on the contract side, or whenever, at one point I wanted to see how it does handle renewals, like when you're entering it?
So you'd have your initial, it's on the main,
Yeah, you'd have your initial expiration, and then any renewal action date, and then an extended through. So if you were to utilize that expiration date as a hard cut for payment, and it was renewed at a certain date, you put the date in there, and then you put the extended through, the system would look first at that initial expiration. If it's beyond that, then it would look to see if there's an extended through date. If not, then that initial expiration date is the hard cutoff. If there is, then that extended through date becomes the new cutoff for payment on the contract.
So when you're initially setting it up, and we got a contract, it was awarded on the 20th for 1 year with 4 renewal options. My initial expiration is 1 year from today, but my extended through would be today plus 5 years, or 4 years.
If they're automatic, I would say I probably put the extended through because, I mean, unless something,
I'm just trying to understand the logic then, if you'll help me. How would we, I'm telling you, that's how we enter them, the majority of them are 1 year with 4-year renewal options. How do we enter that?
okay, I mean, it depends on how you would manage it. If you want to do the end of the first year as the initial expiration, and then each year go in and say, you know, extended through and update that 1 year out each time, that's really up to you. If you wanted to put the initial expiration at the end of the 5 years, you know, maybe in reality, that those options are always, you know, given, then, you know, you can put that initial expiration out to the end of 5 years. It's really more of a business process than a system requirement.
So if every year vendors are able to review pricing and update pricing, how can we update pricing?
Well, the pricing wouldn't be tracked on the contract here.
right? Because we're not using items.
Yeah.
But you could attach the new updated contracts in here and just extend the date. I mean, that's how I would envision this, is you'd have your initial contract and you'd have your initial expiration date.
Yep.
And then for every year you renew it, you just extend, you know, a renewal date and show the extension, and you would look at that and say, okay, had 5 renewals, you'd see the original contract, and so you'd go 4 more years after the initial expiration.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, that would, the pricing negotiations and updated pricing and all that would be outside of the system. But yeah, I agree with Benjamin in that situation. When that renegotiation is done, then you put that renewal date extended to the end of that year. Next year, the same thing, you would put the new renewal action date when it's renegotiated, and then extend that through the end of the next year.
So you'd have to do that every year with every renewal. There's not just one automatic thing you can set it there from the beginning.
No.
You'd have to manually go in every year and renew your renewal date, like, kind of like what we do.
Yeah, what we do
Yeah.
now.
I mean, like I said, you could put the initial expiration at the end of those 5 years, and then manage the renegotiations and pricing outside of it, especially if you're not going to use the expiration as a hard cutoff, that might be an option. But I mean, using it this way, if somebody were to come in and look at that contract a month into the next year and they didn't see the renewal action and the extended through date, they might say, did we renegotiate this one? And then that might trigger them to, inquire or look into it. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, that's really pretty much it on the contracts. Pretty, from the ERP systematic side, it's pretty powerful. There's a lot of bells and whistles.
So how are you guys thinking about this? Right now, I've kind of set up some security. And while we were here today, I gave you guys security for administration, for entry. There is a view access that we could give to every user, give them view access. But aside from that, I haven't really set anything up. It's really, there's not a lot to it. You would decide if you wanted to use this, and you'd start entering your contracts using your methods, your processes, and then we could make sure that our users start entering that contract. We have not trained them on that, but that could be they know they're supposed to enter contract information.
Yeah.
They asked, okay, put it in the description is what they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So just to have them switch and move that up to a contract
Yeah.
section would be the easy transition on this.
Agreed.
So I don't envision rolling this out right away, but it's not really mine. So if you guys wanted to get to work on it and get it all in by go live, it could go live without any extra work. But there's no rush.
Right.
So we have hundreds, if not thousands of contracts, on public contract right now. Is there a way, or what, we've got it.
Is there a way to import contracts,
The
Jay?
whole, do we have to do it?
There's an
one at a
XMLS
time?
file, but it's not optimal.
Doesn't work well.
Yeah.
So we'd have to do a lot of manual import.
So,
There's no way to dump
What
a bunch in.
I would envision the process looking like would be starting with whatever active contracts are on public contracts, sorting through those, taking out commodities, taking out cooperatives, taking out stuff that pretty much the commission hasn't approved,
Right.
and entering only services into the contract side to play around.
Yeah, to get it started.
Yeah, and at least get stuff whatevered, like,
I got
oh, what you doing there?
I'm gonna let y'all discuss for a second. I'm gonna run to the restroom real quick. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
move on to purchasing.
Yeah, I'll open it up. We got 35 minutes left, so when you
Okay.
come back, we'll talk about. So from here, I had some notes of things that we could cover, but this is yours. So if you have questions, things you really want to, that came up yesterday or other things, we could talk about those. But I would like for Jay to show you the online marketplace / e-procurement. We don't have a great, nothing's set up yet, so we don't have any great vendors. We can go to a different environment and we can pull up some of those vendors and show you how it works. Have you seen e-procurement?
I
On
have,
Munis with
Varus, yeah,
Okay.
in the demo.
We'll just move it closer. How about that?
And we can break these.
Okay. We've only got about 35 minutes left on this. And then we're going to go to a different one, which won't have a lot of need for microphones, maybe. Yeah. But, so you guys have the rest of the time, 35
Okay.
minutes to decide what you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see the e-marketplace side, I
Yeah.
think,
Absolutely.
and
How interested are you guys in the bid and quote module?
not at all.
Okay. So,
Based on, and I'm gonna tell you where that's coming from, that's, a lot of it's based on feedback
from other
NIGP people using Munis that originally bought the bid and quote and originally bought the contract management and got their money back for it because it was crap. So hopefully we can, what I'm hoping
So the contract side could work for us.
It could work for us.
Looks like it could. And,
Only on the services though, not the commodities.
yeah, I don't want to get involved in the items. I
I
saw
don't
that
either.
maintenance and I'm like, that's too much work.
And I really, really think if we can, when we do training, if it's a service, if somebody is coming on county grounds to do something for us, because we're not gonna do it ourselves, we're not paying our staff to do it, that's a service. And if it's something tangible, then that's purchased from the marketplace. Services are purchased, services have to have the contracts because they have to have certificates of insurance, because we have to have all these other checks and balances in place. Commodities, not so much, I'll grab it.
Okay, so marketplace is the next and most important thing then. Okay.
I am gonna grab a refill and some coffee if that's cool. I'll make it really, really fast, I promise. Run, I will. Well, I'm gonna grab some.
Okay. So we're jumping to purchasing?
We're gonna go, we'd like to see the e-procurement marketplace, shop online stuff.
Okay. It's gonna be tricky because y'all don't have anything set up.
Then that's fine, I've seen it.
I can jump out to our virtual environment, but I'll have to completely disconnect from your system and go out. Would that be beneficial?
At this point, probably for this
Okay.
training, yes.
Disconnect.
Jay, we got 30 minutes on this, and then we're gonna switch over to, then we're gonna take a break, and we'll have the main guide for AP user, or main training for AP users and P-card.
Just takes a minute to log in.
No problem.
Okay, so just a couple of quick mentions on the front end. So to use the online shopping, there's actually, as I hear, purchasing, a setting that you have to activate, which then adds an additional tab to the vendors to set up their portal information. Yeah, it's under third-party interface on the purchasing settings, the e-procurement down here, and basically you're gonna say, you know, do not allow or allow online shopping and use individual vendors, or if you had like a third party, I guess it kind of sounds like that, a Verus. Does a Verus manage other third-party sites that it links to? So that might be the third option.
These are radio buttons, meaning you get to pick one of these three options. If we had Verus, they don't have Amazon, but we
Right.
would also want Amazon.
So Amazon, then you would need to set that up as a vendor, setup within the vendor module, and you want to select option 2.
Okay, but we also would want to use Verus, which is option 3.
Then you would have to set Verus up as their own online portal vendor, and then you would go out through them. And so, like, if you're purchasing through Verus, do you get the invoice and goods from Verus?
No,
You would get it from those third parties.
from the vendors.
That would be a little tricky to do both then. Because that would you would want to use the third one, which then would preclude you from using Amazon.
It would exclude them.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean you couldn't still go out to Amazon website and do the, shop.
But
with
you
a
just can't
P
connect
card.
it in.
You couldn't connect it to systematically, right?
Which is, right, which is what they have to do now anyway.
Yeah.
And my thought was, if we make it easy, users are gonna use the easiest methods. And if, in my opinion, if Amazon isn't an option, because we can't guarantee quality, we can't guarantee where it's coming from, we can't guarantee a lot of things when we use Amazon. So we eliminate that as an option, which, I mean, we can do.
So they could still use it, but
Yes.
they just couldn't use the
The
marketplace.
benefits of the
shop online.
marketplace, correct. And then,
As long as you're okay with that, because those are radio buttons, we get one of 3 options. We get none, Amazon, or Verus.
so, and that's okay too, because what we can do, we can control how Amazon operates too. And if you're gonna use Amazon, then you have to use your P card. And if you're gonna use Amazon, you have to make purchases with your P card, no more invoices with Amazon, and that's just kind of how that rolls.
That eliminates the department issues of which ones get paid. And
It eliminates the double entry too, which is what we're trying to resolve with Verus. Well, another one of the things we're trying to resolve with Verus too is increase those efficiencies.
Okay.
Well, I guess that's not gonna help a whole lot because.
That's okay.
Are you on Impel? Or you're on
I'm on our virtual environment, which used to have Dell set up on a couple of their vendors as with their e-procurement sites. No longer there. I'm not sure
what
why
about
they.
Amazon? You want to try that? Because you showed me Amazon, Dell, Staples, Office Depot.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any of them set up in the virtual right now. Let me check your Impel environment. I'll jump back into yours, which stinks because they used to be set up in there.
With Verus, the demo we sat in on the hub home screen, there's a Verus Marketplace button on the hub screen.
On the Munis hub. Okay. So who's your contact? Who was the one?
At Verus?
Well,
Or-
was that a site that was using them, that you saw that, or was that Verus?
It was Verus.
And they showed you Munis?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it is doable. There's a lot of flexibility with cards and links on the homepage. And so you could go out there, you could go shop, and then it would automatically open up a requisition? Or would you have to go to requisitions and start there? 'Cause I'm
No,
not
you
quite
go
sure how
through
that
the
button-
marketplace, it routes through the approvals. Once the final approval is made, the order is released to the vendor, and it's in shows up in Munis as a purchase order. Or an invoice, however you want to set it up, but I can send
So
you the
we
demo.
Currently, yeah, I need to talk about how that would function, because right now we built it to where everybody enters a requisition, or in the case of how the e-procurement works, is you go to the requisition, you start it, then you click into the marketplace, and then it takes you into the marketplace to go shop for what you need. So with that third radio option, it sounds like when we enter a requisition, we would select our vendor, then we'd go down and do shop, and it would take us, we could direct it to go through Veris to that portal for that vendor, and then it would bring it all into the requisition. That's how I would envision this working. So I just need to make sure we're on the same page with Veris, and if it's not, choose the method that would work.
Yeah, so I think all the orders would come into the requisition through Veris.
Yeah, that's what I would like it to do, because we don't allow anybody to enter an invoice without a purchase order attached. 'Cause
Right.
what can happen is
They
when they go
wouldn't
to
be entering
enter.
an invoice.
Yeah.
They'd be entering an order. Like, so right now, when anybody goes to Staples, they place an order on Staples and nobody reviews it. Nobody approves this order from Staples until we get an invoice, and then we see.
Right.
So this way, you go order through, you can place one order with 17 different vendors and have 17 different purchase orders.
I need to
And-
see how that works, because our security we don't create purchase orders until it goes through the requisition approvals, and we don't have a purchase order.
I'm
approved.
probably using the wrong terminology, I'm using the wrong word,
Okay.
and that's what we're all getting
Let's-
hung up
let's
on
get a
right
meeting
now.
set up.
So
Yeah, you need a
I
meeting
will
set up.
redo this demo.
Yeah, you need a meeting set up. And then on Amazon,
Thank you.
I'm having a lot of difficulty with, I get like a report every month of delinquent, like who hasn't paid their invoices, and some of them are like 289 days that just show up. Yeah, and it's a lot of times the sheriff. And so, anyway, that's a problem. So if we made Amazon strictly a P card purchase, we wouldn't have those invoice issues anymore.
Right.
Because I keep having to send them an email saying, hey, look, you've got this out here, it's been outstanding for 45 days. Amazon gives us a 45-day window to pay it. We all understand that, government moves a little bit slowly in the way we have to get our things processed, but.
289 is not.
That's a very unusual thing, but it does happen where it's like over 100 days. And then it usually happens at the end of the year when,
Commission doesn't,
Yeah.
doesn't process payments.
before the new budget is set, so. So those are issues, but yeah, if we could just do P card only, that would be great.
So anytime a requisition's entered for Amazon, we would say.
It'd be like
"Oh,
their own vendor,
Yeah.
set them up as their own vendor, period, and not go through the marketplace.
Jay, is there a way to set up a vendor to not allow requisitions against them? Okay, just
Well,
curious.
how would the P card, well, I already.
P cards
did
come in
it.
as invoices,
Right.
so they get imported as invoices, and we wouldn't have to worry about requisitions. But we just have to know whenever we see an Amazon requisition, send it back. No, you're supposed to purchase on your P card.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any setup in your Impel environment for online shopping either.
Okay.
But in a nutshell, basically, you would set the, requisition down here in the URL. The PO submission would be set up so that it would push it.
Well, I'm just saying, but that may also be a discussion, P card discussion with every department. Why don't you have a P card?
Because not
Also,
everybody
we only
wants
have
it.
a certain amount,
Yeah, available credit.
That's true.
and everyone wants increases all the time,
All
so we
the
get
time.
super close to that.
You know what?
So Jay would like to show you just for a few minutes. There's multiple URLs that's required if we set up a vendor. That we've got to set up a URL to go out and order
In
on
the
the
e-marketplace?
requisitions. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is, so you'd have your requisition, which, on the requisition line, you would click online shopping. This URL for the specific vendor would push you out to that site, website or mini site. You would pick your goods. When you check out from that site, this would bring it back in and put each item line in your requisition automatically. It would pull it in with that unit pricing, quantities, whatever you ordered on that site. When it's processed and the PO is complete, these PO submission credentials are what would push it back out. They would receive it. And then there's also an electronic invoicing credential, you know, that you could bring back in and do the electronic invoicing from that, the purchase of that.
So there's three elements. One, we want to purchase, so we go out and shop and it comes back and brings it into the requisition. Then when it's purchase ordered, I believe we're sending them the purchase order to let them
Right.
know, go ahead and place the order now that we've been approved. Once it's ordered and an invoice has been issued, that invoice would come back and be imported in to the invoicing and connect with the purchase order. So three elements that when we set up a vendor using this, if it's a single vendor, this is what we would do to set up in that marketplace.
I'm just gonna look and see from that electronic invoicing if there's any, like a lag time. I would suspect there's a lag time that it wouldn't automatically generate it. And
On that screen, there were buttons for user ID and password. Would that be like a general, like, instead of having individual users have,
Like a countywide credentials.
yeah,
like on Staples, everybody has their own login,
yeah, it would not. It would be one,
one
like a
login.
county user credentials, password, sign on.
Okay.
And so then the way about this process that helps, right now, when someone orders on Staples and we got to pay it, then we're worried about which account and all that.
Right.
When this person goes out, it's going to connect the requisition, the
To that
purchase order, and the
user.
invoice. So I mean, it's all going to be part of that process, that it wouldn't just sit out there by itself. You'd see these invoices that have been imported that aren't processing. You'd be like, okay, we need to get this Staples one paid. Staples connects it. They have the invoice. They're good. We have our end. It's connected to our departments and our expenses. So it brings it all together so that we don't have to worry about
Okay.
payment going for which invoice and all of that.
Yeah, and the reason being, because like some clients have, say some school boards, like I guess with Granger, I think it is, they have specialized pricing agreements. So the Granger would actually build them their own mini website with their pricing models. That's where they would go versus, and they wouldn't provide that to, you know, individual users because they don't have the permissions or the rights to those pricing. I don't know if, you know, Clay County has any specific pricing arrangements with any specific vendors, but. Okay. That's pretty much it in a nutshell for online shopping without being able to go out and walk through it, but.
So we're really down to those radio buttons. So Veris, we need to make sure that they'll integrate the way we think. So have a meeting with them, and are you feeling like that's something the commission and the administration would support? Do we know?
I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't.
I don't know how much it would cost.
I do. Well, yeah, I mean, it's tiered and it's a subscription cost, and we don't have final numbers. We know worst case scenario is $35,000 every year for the first 3 years.
For the first year.
But when you think about the compliance, the immediate compliance that we have now across commodities anyway, when you think about the gains and efficiencies that our purchasing partners are going to have through just ordering, like they order, once they place the order, they don't have to go into the financial system and re-enter all of that information again. It kind of eliminates a lot of human error, a lot of, because everything's currently manual now.
So what about like one-off small vendors that we need, you know, and unique things that aren't covered in the Veris marketplace? We would try to push people to the Veris marketplace, but are we gonna allow, you know, some purchases for things that are not included in that marketplace?
I mean, well, yeah, obviously, we have to, right?
So we've got functionality that we're not gonna include that. Okay.
Well, I mean, the one-offs, like, I'm trying to think commodity-wise.
I purchased an annual software for, what is it, $349 or $399, you know, a year. You know, it wouldn't be through the marketplace, there wouldn't be any deals for it. They don't want to sign any contracts with anybody, they want their money, you know, they don't want to discount it.
Can you put it on a P card?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just trying to
Yeah,
think of
so
like,
if we're gonna push that way, P-card limit would need to probably increase too.
I mean, not necessarily, because, I mean, that's 399, your P card, majority of we'll get into P cards in a
Yeah.
minute, but like, majority of P card limits are $2,500
And not used.
and not used. So, their
Well, I
potential,
would say 25 and under.
yeah, yes, good point, thank you. No, that's good to hear.
I mean, there are a lot of just 1,000s, but those are also the ones that I constantly get.
Can you increase to
limit?
But see, I mean, it's gonna get crazy if we're going this route. There may be vendors like, you know, 12, 13,000 that may not be on a contract for something we need, so we're gonna push P-cards. So I don't know, just kind of thinking through some processes on
Well,
things.
wouldn't it would be entered the same way that a service, that we would enter a regular requisition?
Mhm.
It's just not tied to a contract, and it doesn't need to be because it's not
Yeah.
over the dollar amount, it's not.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll probably talk through, I need to see how Veris will work, make sure we can set up with them.
Or you could set them up with an individual vendor. When it comes to that.
Right, like we do now.
Yeah, like we do now, you
Mhm.
just, you know.
Set them up as a
requisition-
and,
Requisitions against that, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of vendors that we have that aren't under contract, that they have a vendor number,
Mhm.
and we submit invoices for.
Okay,
Or not we, but.
right.
so we have 10 more minutes with Jay. Is there anything else you guys want to go over with Jay, or do we want to just talk about things? Do you guys have any questions, any concerns from any of the trainings we've seen?
I like contracts more.
I do too. I want to play around in it for sure. Are there
Can you-
reporting capabilities? Like, how do we see, can we pull
A list
report?
of all the contracts.
Contracts, yeah. Yeah, bear with me.
Why don't you guys refresh your test database, your test environment? I gave you security, I gave you the ability to enter contracts, and I gave you contract admin. The only thing I didn't give you was view only, which I think I don't think you want the view only. That's for people that aren't gonna be accessing. So,
Account-
you're
contract
still very
central?
limited on contracts, so. Do you have a contract entry?
No.
No,
Okay.
you said contract central and print.
So Contract Central is probably where you do some of your reporting. I'll have to figure out what security I need to give you. My settings show contract miscellaneous codes, contract site types and subtypes, and contract bond types. So there's things that we can set up in the background for you guys. Then there's contract entry, contract central, contract change orders, approvals, and print contracts, contracts receiving, contract project payments, or progress payments. You can import contracts.
Yeah, there's a contract import. This is an XML file. It's fairly limited on the data that you can import. And secondly, it's an XML. It's got a file that's got to be created up front. And it's, I mean, if you have a lot of contracts, it might be beneficial, but then most clients have to go in and touch each one to update various items on it. It's kind of a catch-22 if it's really.
So then most of your reporting and information will be through Contract Central. And it's just like all the other centrals, you'd have search capability, you'd have saved search capability where you could set up multiple different searches. So like you could choose, I want to look at all this type of contract or all contracts for sheriff or different ways you want to search.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there's probably a lot of neat features in the central. Central is really where you guys would live a lot.
Yeah, the contract centrals is really probably truly the main report or overview screen, if you will, to see all the contracts and information associated with it. So one thing two things actually that I didn't really get into with the contracts. So if you set up a contract as an encumbered contract and you do want to use three-way match, you don't necessarily have to use a purchase order. You can receive directly on a contract rather than a purchase order and pay directly off a contract without using a purchase order. So more or less the encumbered contract acts as the purchase order also. The other thing is you could put contractor progress payments directly in against a contract that would create an AP payment. It would push out to the AP module to create the payment, but it would be initiated in the contract module rather than going out, entering an invoice associated with a contract.
So that would be something we could do for like our outside agencies, those contracts that are awarded every year and budget, they come out of the budget as opposed to.
The encumbered contracts?
I'm really just trying to ask Benjamin a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talking out
I
loud.
thought you were
It's
talking
fine.
to me.
No.
Go ahead, I wasn't listening.
Well,
Try
like
again.
a lot of the times when he's talking about stuff, I'm trying to apply it to what we do now and how can we use this now? How can we use this module and make it beneficial
Yep.
for our process now? And so that was kind of where I was going with that question.
Okay, so I didn't hear the question. Go ahead and repeat it. Sorry.
Nope.
I'm setting up your security, so I was,
Nope, it's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Okay, so go ahead and refresh your browser, and if it comes to you, let me know. Brenda, I'm working on you right now. So Patrick and Leslie are set up.
Oh, and Ethel would need to be also.
Yeah, I can get her fixed too. I've given you all the security that,
We still
the
have
basic
it.
profiles.
It's the blank.
Oh, Jay, where would contract, I maybe just need to create a new contract profile for you guys. which is-
In the roles, you mean?
Yeah, and I actually have a role for purchasing. So this was
Okay.
just a quick attempt to try to get you everything. but-
I see some stuff under approved contracts. But not under contracts.
Okay, so I'll come back, I'll build out the contract piece for you. If you're really that interested in it, I'll build it out once you play with it.
So I see
I mean,
some fields
I
under
see
it.
a lot of potential, but like I can see potential in anything. So I don't want to go crazy, excited, because I will. I mean, I'm gonna, you're gonna have to come up with something more than that backhand to contain me if this is like, yeah. I mean, I will make it work.
There is a lot of potential, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a
I
lot.
mean, when you go to Contract Central, you get an advanced search, and then you click on that.
There's no contracts in there,
There's no
but
contract, but
Yes.
I mean, it shows you how you can,
what all you can
Search
do.
for stuff.
So like what Jay was talking about before, about like would be instances for like the highway department and like a construction project where the contractor wouldn't, I mean, we wouldn't submit I don't think they do submit a requisition every time they're doing something on the construction project.
Periodic billing usually, like a monthly
Yeah.
billing.
That's kind of what, I thought it would apply to those kind of things like that, or
Yeah.
highway department, or,
Make sure they apply it to the contract. And
Yes.
let them track inside, and it would give you guys, it would be a lot easier for you guys to maintain, and you wouldn't have to check as many things. Yeah.
You do have more contract functional roles
I gave them all of them, and they still don't have contract entry.
on the menu.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so these probably don't have menu access. Okay, this one does.
Yeah, I gave them the contract admin. You're in, yeah, I did it in test.
Is there anything we have to do with that weird 3-dot thing where we had to change,
Yeah, they should have, just simply from the contract admin, does
Yeah, go to
have,
Tyler menu and 3 dots on the side there, right click or left click and refresh. And check it again. There it is.
check it
I
out?
thought just refreshing it up in the upper left would refresh menu too, but,
nah,
Good to know.
unfortunately, yeah, the
okay.
3 ellipses.
So I gave you everything. You got the
Okay.
whole kit and caboodle.
Check it out.
Yeah, they're probably gonna get hung up if there's not any types and various things built yet. When if they try to go in and add one.
Yeah, so, I can help you with the setup on the miscellaneous codes and things, unless you guys want to just dabble with it, but all the different pieces that need to be built to be able to get the contracts.
Is that what yours is doing?
Yeah, those won't be required.
And they have to have codes?
Oh, maybe I.
No, you don't, I mean, there's some codes that'll be helpful for you for sorting and organizing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the type is actually, I think the only one that might hang them up from adding one.
I did that too.
Yeah. Here, yeah, the type is the only one that's required really that,
What are
Might
our
hold 'em up.
options?
Maybe the menu, those are the
I got an idea that I want to run by you.
so there's a general, I mean, it's all user defined, whatever type, subtypes you need.
that's what I did.
So on requisitions, I have it set to not require a contract. I can change it to where
Yes.
every requisition has to have a contract. We could set up this blank contract for a general purchase that is not under any other contract, that, we wouldn't require a contract. And so when you see those, you'd have to be more, scrutinize them a little bit more when you see that one pop up. But that way, everybody has to enter something there. And then they have to choose a contract or the one that is no contract, then you look at those.
And then reporting wise, because I'm trying, and rather than approving individually, right? I'm trying to think of reporting wise where we can run a report for, show me all of the requisitions entered with no contract attached.
Or with this one that's a contract like 99999.
Right, like that one, some identifier. Those are the ones we,
Would have
Check
to,
out.
have to really look into.
and it could even be that there is a contract associated with it and they just don't know.
Right.
And then it's a training thing, but at
Yeah.
least we have an identifier.
A way to identify. So,
Yeah.
so that's a setting I can choose.
Okay.
To make them enter a contract.
Yes.
I like
And
I
we
do
could
too.
So Jay, that's possible, right? To set up a contract that's really a fake contract that would be one for every vendor that's not a contract vendor?
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay,
I dig.
okay.
For spot buys. I dig it. And maybe that's the contract number. Spot.
Maybe want to use something that everybody might recognize.
Spot.
Because I can see a lot of users getting kind of lazy and being like, I'm not going to search for it. I'm just going to plug in the contract, make purchasing do the work
Sure.
for me.
Yep.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
Reject. Try again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Going out of the building, make sure you.
I do, yeah, I do
questions
like
or-
that.
I mean, if you're going out, make sure you open the door so you can get back in.
Yeah, and we can probably leave it open. Jay, if you need, you got some things to work on, so. we'll
Yeah, I was
take
gonna
a
work on
half
that, see if I can get that P card import, to at least import a few records.
That would be phenomenal. So we'll go ahead and take a 30-minute break, and we'll be back at 10:30 for P-card and
Did you
admin.
ever get in touch with that